Number, the quiet shift Taurus. Can you feel it? A very different kind of peace is settling within you. Not loud, not performative, yet steady in a way that feels almost unreal. It is the kind of peace that no longer needs explaining, no longer needs holding on, no longer needs to prove anything to anyone. There was a time when others mistook your patience for permission, mistook your loyalty for weakness, mistook your silence for ignorance. But that phase has quietly closed without noise, without bitterness, simply with no way back. You have stepped into a new cycle. And once a Taurus enters this cycle, all forms of manipulation lose their footing. Theme: 7 signs. You have become untouchable. Today we will walk together through 7 signs that show you have reached a state where no one can control your emotions, guilt-trip you, or manipulate you anymore. And stay until the end, because reason number 1 is not only surprising, it also carries the deepest lesson of the entire journey. Before we begin, leave a comment, your zodiac sign plus date of birth, as a way to mark this new chapter into the flow of the universe. #7. Taurus no longer explains themselves because your presence is already the answer. There was a time when Taurus spoke a lot. Not because you loved justifying yourself, but because you believed that if you were sincere enough, clear enough, patient enough, then others would understand. You explained your emotions with softness. You explained your boundaries with endurance. You explained your pain with an almost absolute loyalty. You believed that if you loved deeply enough, if you stayed long enough, if you gave genuinely enough, then everything would naturally balance itself out. But Taurus, there are people who do not want to understand, because once they do, they lose the advantage to manipulate you. And then through each disappointment, through every moment you realized you were speaking to a wall, a very quiet transformation began to take place within you. No noise, no anger, just exhaustion from having to prove the purity of your heart. You began to recognize a very deep truth. Those who truly value you will feel you even when you are silent. Those who consistently misunderstand you are often not confused, but choosing misunderstanding in order to keep control. And in that very moment, Taurus stepped into a new level of awareness. You no longer rush to explain yourself, no longer feel anxious when misunderstood, no longer scramble to patch relationships that exist only through one-sided endurance. Your silence is no longer surrender. It is maturity that has walked through enough pain to know what is futile. You understand now, not everyone deserves your explanation. Not every truth needs to be presented. And not every heart is refined enough to touch the depth of a Taurus soul. From there, your energy shifts. You no longer need to say, "I am loyal," those who stay long enough will see it. You no longer need to say, "I am sincere," the way you love already speaks. You no longer need to say, "I have value." Your grounded presence leaves manipulators feeling displaced. Taurus, the moment you stop explaining, those who once lived off the feeling of controlling you begin to grow uneasy. They no longer know which words to use to pull you back. They no longer know which fear to trigger to make you doubt yourself. Because you no longer respond according to the old script. You stand there, quiet, yet deeply solid. Like the earth that does not need to justify its stability. Like the mountain that does not need to explain why it does not move. This is not coldness. This is steadiness forged through betrayal, disappointment, and healing. You still love, but you no longer trade yourself away. You are still loyal, but no longer loyal to what harms you. You are still gentle, but gentle with your own soul first. And that is exactly what brings you into the phase where no one can manipulate you anymore. Because manipulation requires reaction, requires explanation, requires the feeling that you still have something to prove. And you do not. You understand that well-timed silence is a form of wisdom, that not every misunderstanding needs to be clarified, and that sometimes the deepest form of healing is allowing those who are not aligned to quietly leave your life. Taurus, when you stop explaining, you do not lose love. You are simply refining who is truly worthy of standing within your very deep inner world. And that is the moment your loyalty becomes sacred, your steadiness turns into power, and your emotions finally are placed exactly where they deserve to be honored. #6. Taurus begins to see before anything can reach the heart. After Taurus stops explaining another, door quietly opens inside you. That is the moment your intuition fully awakens. No longer a vague feeling, no longer a faint hunch dismissed by logic, but a knowing that is very clear, very still, very certain. You begin to see things before they have the chance to hurt you. In the past, Taurus often understood last. Not because you were naive, but because you chose to believe. You believed in words. You believed in promises. You believed that your kindness would be met with equal kindness in return. You once allowed others to step deeply into your inner world before realizing they were not sincere enough to stay. But now, it is different. Now Taurus feels misalignment from the very first contact. An inauthentic gaze. A sentence carrying another meaning beneath the surface. An energy that does not match what they are presenting in words. You do not need to analyze. You do not need proof. You do not need more time to wait and see. Your body knows, your soul knows, and you trust it. This is the moment Taurus enters the phase where no one can manipulate you anymore, because manipulation always requires a delay. It needs time to plant doubt. It needs space to make you question yourself, and you no longer give it that chance. You no longer allow others to cross multiple boundaries with words alone. You observe how they treat those who are vulnerable. You listen to what they avoid saying. You feel their energy when they do not get what they want from you. And, in that quiet observation, you see very clearly, not everyone comes with love. Not everyone who seems kind is truly kind. And not everyone who needs you values you. In the past, Taurus would try to understand. Try to give one more chance. Try to stay a little longer, hoping the other person would change. And now, you recognize it early and withdraw gently. Not because you fear being hurt, but because you are no longer interested in old lessons. You have learned enough. You understand that Taurus loyalty is a sacred resource, and it was never meant to nourish relationships that are vague, selfish, or emotionally manipulative. When you see through something, you do not expose it. When you sense intention, you do not confront it. You simply do not allow it to take another step forward. Your silence now carries a different meaning. No longer endurance, but a conscious choice. Dear Taurus, there is a deep truth you have touched. A manipulator only has power when you have not yet seen them. The moment you see, that power dissolves. And because of this, those who were once accustomed to reading your emotions, guiding your reactions, placing you into familiar emotional loops, now feel confused around you. They no longer know what to say to make you waver. They do not know whether to use silence or drama to pull you back. Because you are no longer playing on their emotional field. You are standing on another level, grounded, still, and deeply awake. This is not a loss of faith in humanity. This is wisdom earned through lived experience. You still love, but not blindly. You are still gentle, but you no longer give it to the wrong hands. You are still loyal, but loyal to truth, not to illusion. And this ability to see early is the soft yet impenetrable armor of Taurus. An armor that does not harden you, but brings you a peace deeper than ever before. #5. Taurus sets boundaries without hurting anyone, including themselves. After Taurus learns how to see early, the next step in your awakening journey is not defense but boundary building. Yet, Taurus's boundaries are unlike anyone else's. You don't build high walls. You don't slam doors shut. You don't announce, warn, or threaten to leave. Your boundaries form very quietly, like the earth instinctively, knowing where its roots belong. Once Taurus believed that love meant endurance. That loyalty meant staying even when it hurt. That patience meant waiting, tolerating, suppressing. You mistook sacrifice for love. You mistook silence for maturity. You mistook staying for worth. And the price you paid was nameless. Exhaustion. Empty nights even while lying beside someone. Moments when your soul whispered, "I no longer belong here." Now you understand, Taurus. Boundaries are not punishment. Boundaries are the deepest form of self-respect. You begin learning to say no without lengthy explanations. To walk away without feeling guilty. To stop giving more chances when intuition has already spoken clearly. And the strange thing is, you don't become cold. On the contrary, you grow gentler because you are no longer stretched thin, more stable because you are no longer living in inner conflict, more peaceful because you are no longer betraying yourself. Taurus, when you set boundaries the right way, those who once manipulated you begin to feel confused. They can no longer reach your weak points. They can no longer make you feel responsible for their emotions. They can no longer use silence, false remorse, or drama to pull you back. Because your boundaries do not need arguments. They simply exist. You don't say, "Don't do this to me." You simply no longer allow it to continue. And that is when you enter the phase where no one can manipulate Taurus anymore. Because manipulation always needs an opening. It needs a Taurus who fears loneliness. It needs a Taurus who still believes that giving more will change someone. But you do not. You have learned that not every relationship needs to be saved. Not every connection deserves your loyalty. And not everyone has the right to step deeply into the sacred emotional world of Taurus. Your boundaries now do not come from wounds, but from healing. You don't close doors out of fear. You choose carefully because you know your worth. You understand that Taurus loyalty is not meant for those who make you doubt yourself, that your steadfastness was never meant to serve ingratitude, and that your emotional strength is not a resource for others to consume. Taurus, the boundaries you are building do not isolate you. They purify. Those who come to you in truth will stay. Those who come with calculation will leave on their own. No battles needed. No exposure required. No need to win. Your steadiness does that naturally. And within that new space, you breathe more deeply, sleep more peacefully, love more slowly yet more truthfully. You begin to feel yourself again. No more tension. No more excessive guarding. Just a Taurus standing firmly on their own ground. That is an ancient power, rare, and very difficult to manipulate. #4. Taurus no longer reacts and your silence becomes power. There was a time in life when Taurus reacted a great deal. Not because you were weak, but because you cared. You reacted when others misunderstood you. You reacted when they hurt you yet denied it. You reacted when your loyalty was taken for granted. You once believed that if you explained yourself calmly enough, expressed yourself sincerely enough, endured softly and patiently enough, then everything would be okay. But Taurus, there are people who live off your reactions. They need you to be angry so they can feel powerful. They need you to be sad so they can feel important. They need you to speak up so they can keep twisting the story in their favor. And then, after countless moments of exhaustion, you couldn't even name something shifted within you very gently, yet very deeply. You no longer react immediately. Not because you don't feel, but because you no longer let your emotions be led away. Taurus begins to pause, to observe, to sense the full energy of the situation before speaking. And it is in that very pause that you realize a truth that turns everything around. Not every action requires a reaction. Not every word deserves your emotion. And not every confrontation needs your presence. Your silence is no longer endurance. It becomes a conscious choice. You stay silent when you realize the other person is not seeking understanding but control. You stay silent when you see that your words would only become fuel for drama. You stay silent when you understand that if you keep speaking, you will be pulled back into an old loop. And that is the moment you enter the phase where no one can manipulate Taurus anymore. Because manipulation needs reaction. It needs back and forth. It needs your explaining, justifying, doubting yourself. And you no longer give it that. You don't argue. You don't prove. You don't try to be understood. You let silence speak for you. And Taurus, your silence is not empty. It carries lived experience, awakened awareness, and a deep inner strength forged through pain. Those who were once accustomed to triggering your emotions begin to feel uneasy. They no longer know what tone to use to shake you. They don't know whether to apply pressure, use silence, or guilt to pull you back. Because you no longer step into their emotional game. You stand outside, calm, grounded, like the earth that does not tremble at every footstep, like the mountain that does not answer every gust of wind. This is not coldness. This is emotional power that has been mastered. You still feel deeply, but you no longer let emotions control your actions. You understand that reaction is not always strength. Timely silence can protect your soul better than 1,000 words. And peace does not need to be proven, Taurus. When you no longer react the old way, you reclaim all the power you once mistakenly handed to others. No one can anymore pull you into chaos, make you doubt your worth, or manipulate your emotions with familiar tricks, because you have learned how to hold your center. Your silence now is not a void. It is a sacred space, one not everyone is allowed to enter. And within that space, Taurus stands very steady, very awake, and almost impossible to shake. #3. Taurus withdraws their energy back to themselves, and the manipulator reveals themselves. A very quiet shift takes place within Taurus. No one sees it clearly, no one hears you announce it, but those who once leaned on your energy recognize it instantly. You no longer give the way you used to. You no longer spread your care thin for everyone. You are no longer willing to carry the emotional weight of others. You no longer act as a pillar for souls who never learned how to stand on their own. You draw your energy back to yourself, not out of selfishness, but because you understand. Taurus energy is sacred, not a free resource. Once you gave generously, without keeping score. You gave time. You gave listening. You gave loyalty. You gave even the deepest parts of your heart. You believed that giving was love, that staying was devotion, that enduring was maturity. But then you realized, not everyone who receives knows how to cherish. And not everyone who needs you comes from pure affection. Some people come only to lean on your stability, borrow your steadiness to mask their own chaos, drain your energy to sustain their sense of power. And Taurus, when you stop supplying that energy, their true nature begins to surface. You don't need to question. You don't need to expose. You don't need to confront. You simply stop responding immediately. Stop being available at all times. Stop pouring your heart out when your intuition has already warned you. And that is enough. Those who come from genuine love remain. They respect your slow rhythm. They do not demand. They do not pressure. They do not make you feel guilty for needing your own space. But those accustomed to manipulation are different. They begin to grow, irritated by your silence, feel restless when you don't react, become unsettled when they can no longer read your emotions. They call you cold, changed, no longer the same. But Taurus, you have not changed. You have reclaimed what was always yours. You no longer let your energy flow outward unconsciously. You reserve it for your life, for your body, for your peace. And this very act of stepping back, without anger, without noise, becomes the clearest mirror. Manipulators cannot tolerate when they are no longer nourished by your care. They are no longer validated through your reactions. They are no longer the center of your emotional world. They reveal themselves through irritability, through blame, through words meant to make you feel guilty for you not being the same as before. But now Taurus no longer falls into the trap. You understand that if your presence is the condition for someone to be kind, then that kindness was never real. It only removes connections that survive by feeding on you. Taurus, your withdrawal is not escape. It is a return. A return to the true rhythm of your heart. A return to the peace you neglected for far too long. A return to the emotional strength that was always there, only once shared too widely. And in this new space, you feel lighter, clearer, less exhausted, no longer feeling the need to hold anyone together, no longer afraid of loss for choosing yourself, no longer confused between giving and preserving. You begin living from your own center. And Taurus, when you live from that center, all manipulation loses its power. Because manipulation only exists when you abandon yourself. And you have returned, grounded, still, and impossible to pull away again. #2. Taurus no longer attaches emotions to outcomes, and every emotional game dissolves on its own. There was a time when Taurus loved with their whole heart and all their expectations. You believed that if you were sincere enough, patient enough, enduring enough, then the final outcome would be worth it. You once tied your emotions to how others responded. A delayed message could make your heart waver. A careless remark could make you ask yourself, what did I do wrong? Not because you were weak, but because you cared deeply. When Taurus loves, when Taurus trusts, when Taurus commits, it is a total commitment. And that was exactly what once made you a steady ground for subtle emotional games. Because manipulators never need to control your actions. They only need to control your expectations. As long as you still hoped they would change. As long as you still wished they would finally understand. As long as you were still waiting for a beautiful ending to everything you had given. And then, through repeated disappointments, through outcomes that never matched your effort, a profound transformation began to unfold. You released expectations. Not love. Not your values. But the belief that you could control outcomes with your emotions. Dear Taurus, the moment you stop attaching emotions to outcomes, every emotional game begins to collapse. Because those games need you to wait, hope, and keep investing emotions even when misalignment is already visible, but you no longer do. You no longer measure your worth by whether someone stays or leaves. You no longer define happiness by someone else's reaction. You no longer blame yourself when things do not turn out as hoped. You understand something with clear calm. Outcomes do not define your value. They only reveal compatibility. And when you understand this, you step away from every emotional chessboard without needing to flip the board. You do not force anyone to choose you. You do not try to prove that you are worthy. You do not cling to an ending that was misaligned from the start. You allow everything to reveal itself naturally. And Taurus, this is what disorients manipulators. They are used to making you wait, making you hope, placing your emotions in their hands. But when you no longer attach emotions to outcomes, they have nothing left to control. You do not stay sad for too long. You do not become overly joyful. You do not fall into extremes. You remain with yourself stable, composed deeply, Taurus. You begin to love without guarantees, to give without needing validation, to stay when there is mutual exchange, and to leave when balance no longer exists. No anger, no resentment, no need for a final explanation. Your calm now does not come from everything being perfect, but from no longer allowing outcomes to dictate your inner state. Taurus, this is a rare kind of freedom. Freedom from being pulled up and dropped down by others' behavior. Freedom from cycles of hope, disappointment, trying again. Freedom from the feeling of having to wait and see what happens. You no longer wait, you observe. And this very observation makes every emotional performance transparent. Those who are sincere are not afraid of your calm. Only those who live off your reactions feel uneasy. When you stop placing emotional bets on outcomes, you do not lose love. You simply keep the love that is aligned in rhythm in place with the right person. And Taurus, this is a step very few ever reach, because it requires strength enough to trust that no matter the outcome, you remain whole, not lacking, not diminished, not reduced in value. And when you stand in that place, all manipulation dissolves before it even has the chance to begin. Hashon. Taurus chooses peace over victory, and from that moment on, no one can reach you anymore. There was a time when Taurus wanted so deeply to be right, not because of ego, but because you believed that if the truth were spoken clearly enough, if fairness were restored to its rightful place, then everything would be okay. You once stood in long, endless arguments, conversations where you had to repeat your feelings just to be acknowledged as not being wrong. You once thought that victory would bring relief, that being understood would bring peace. But Taurus, you learned a lesson that was very deep and very painful before reaching this level. There are battles you win and still feel empty afterward. There are moments when you are right, but your soul is exhausted. And then, in a very quiet moment, not after an argument, not after a separation, but perhaps on a perfectly ordinary evening, you realized you no longer need to win. Not because you lost, but because you no longer want to pay for victory with your own peace. Taurus begins to choose peace. Not the peace that comes from everything being perfect, but the peace that comes from no longer allowing yourself to be pulled into what does not belong to you. You no longer need to tell others where they are wrong, correct the understanding of those who do not want to understand, or prove that your feelings are reasonable. You understand that those who want to understand already have. Those who do not want to understand will not be changed by the talk. Truth. And from there, Taurus steps into a very rare realm, not needing to be right, only needing to be true to yourself. You do not argue to protect your ego. You do not speak up to preserve an image. You do not react to hold a place in someone else's life. You listen to yourself first. You ask, does this bring me peace? Am I speaking for truth or from hurt? Do I need to win or do I need to rest? And if the answer does not lean toward peace, you stop. Not everyone will understand that, and you no longer need them to. Taurus, when you choose peace over victory, all manipulation loses its stage entirely. Because manipulation requires conflict, reaction, the need to prove oneself, and you no longer supply any of those things. You do not enter the game. No need to flip the table. You simply stop sitting down, and that is when power shifts. Those who were once accustomed to pulling you into arguments, making you doubt yourself, forcing you to explain yourself just to have peace, suddenly feel powerless. Not because you are stronger than they are, but because you are no longer vibrating on the same level. Your peace now is not avoidance. It is absolute mastery. You master your emotions, your time, your energy. And Taurus, when peace becomes your center, it is no longer a state, it becomes supreme power. A power that does not need display, does not need victory, does not need recognition. It lives in the way you remain silent at the right moment, the way you leave without resentment, the way you stay only where there is respect. You are not cold. You are clear. You are not weak. You have settled within yourself. And from that place, no one can manipulate Taurus anymore. Because one who has chosen peace will never trade it just to win against anyone. Number. When Taurus returns to self-Taurus. If you look back on this journey, you will realize you did not become stronger by learning how to fight others. You became untouchable by no longer fighting yourself. Step by step, you withdrew your energy. Stopped explaining. Stopped reacting. Stopped placing expectations in the wrong places. Stopped winning battles that brought no peace. And in that process, something very quiet happened. You returned. Returned to the true rhythm of your heart. Returned to values that need no justification. Returned to a steadiness that does not require recognition. Taurus has always been the soul of Earth, not moving for noise, not shaken by fleeting emotions, not losing direction simply because others are not ready to understand. You once believed that love meant giving until empty, that loyalty meant staying until the end, that maturity meant enduring in silence. Now you understand true love must have boundaries, true loyalty must begin with the self, and true maturity is knowing when to leave, when the soul speaks. No one can manipulate you anymore, not because you became cold, but because you became clear. Clear about what belongs to you. Clear about what no longer fits. Clear about the value of peace and the price of losing it. And when peace becomes the living language of your life, all emotional games collapse on their own. All calculations lose their footing. All pretense quietly leaves without you needing to chase it away. Taurus, you do not need to prove that you have grown. Those who are sensitive enough will feel the change the moment they are near you. A stillness with weight, a presence without words, a strength that does not seek victory yet no one dares to dismiss. And from this very deep place, you are no longer afraid of loss, no longer afraid of loneliness, no longer afraid of being misunderstood. Because you have understood an ancient truth. What leaves after you choose peace was never truly yours. What stays when you no longer give, unconditionally, is real. This journey does not turn you into someone else. It only returns you to yourself, a whole, grounded Taurus, calm and no longer manipulable. And if you are reading these lines, perhaps you are very close or have already truly crossed that threshold. Stay there. Trust the peace you are holding. Because when Taurus is anchored within themselves, the entire world must adjust how it treats you.